Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Unity Hour. I am so excited for this because it has been very requested. If you're new to the Mom Project, Unity Hour is our virtual event series where we wind down each Friday with an expert and a topic. This session will be recorded. I just want to let you guys know, don't worry, it's going to be recorded and it will be live on our YouTube page shortly after. We're thrilled to host today Crystal Ohikhuare for our How to Ace a Virtual Interview session. My name is Hiba. I am the social media manager here at the Mom Project. And my girl Tiffany is also here to co-host just in case any technical difficulties happen, because they do. And she's best known at the Mom Project for building unity and our rally programs. And we'll put that information in the chat for you just in case you need to know more about that. So let me introduce to you Crystal, who is a working mom with a passion for coaching career-driven mothers on how to manage their corporate and home life. She's earned her bachelor's degree from Southwestern University and her master's from Louisiana State University. Now, with nearly a decade of HR experience, she partners with working moms on how to launch, grow, and pivot their careers in a way that allows them to be present and available at home simultaneously. She lives in Dallas, Texas, one of my favorite cities, with her husband, Mike, and their daughter, Araya. Today, we'll be getting into how to air-proof your next video interview, selling yourself and your skill set in front of the camera with confidence, because that's key, and how to bend technology to your advantage in the interviewing process. This has been so anticipated because a lot of us are doing virtual interviews. So I'm going to toss it to Crystal.
Awesome. I'm so excited. Let's get set up here. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen. Awesome. Can you guys see that? Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're going to jump in. Hello, everyone. Just like Hiba said, my name is Crystal Ohikhuare, and I am so excited to spend Friday afternoon with you guys talking about how you can completely and totally ace your interview. So whenever I start any talks or anything like this, I always like to tell the audience just a little bit about me, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure the person that's coaching you is legit, right? I would think so. So that's me, my husband, Mike, and Aria, our crazy wild 2-year-old. So like many of you, I'm also a working mama. Partnering with women and especially working moms has been a passion of mine for so many years. And just like Hiba said, she took all my speaking points. I am a Dallas native, born and raised here. And I live in a small town called Saxe, just northeast of the town or the city. I actually live across the street from a horse farm. So super stereotypical Texan girl right here. You know, before I fell into recruiting in HR, I had a huge dream of moving to New York City and being a public relations professional, but that dream never made it past the Mason-Dixon line. And I fell into the magical world of recruiting and HR. And so today I am a recruiting and HR leader, a working mama blogger, a career life coach and public speaker, working obviously with the Mom Project and other organizations with similar missions, helping working women and moms get to that next level in their career, or just helping them figure out how to better manage having one foot in the nursery and one foot in the office. So that is enough about me. Let's dive in. I am a super casual performer. I live for questions. So as we're going through this, if you have questions, do not hesitate to ping them to us and I will answer them as we go along. Hiba, I am a talker. I get in the zone. So if I'm not seeing anything, just flag me down and let me know. Awesome. All right, so let's talk about the numbers that are on your screen. 86%, that is the number of organizations that were conducting virtual interviews as of April of this year. Going virtual, there's been a 70% reduction in carbon footprints from transitioning to virtual interviewing. And unfortunately, 62% of American adults would rather do an in-person interview over a virtual interview. So let's dive into these numbers. A Career Builder study showed that almost 87% of employers knew who they would hire within the first 15 minutes of that connect. So today, it is my job to coach you on how to successfully navigate both the conscious and the subconscious interview biases that come into play, specifically within a virtual interview setting. We do expect these numbers to drop some once we're no longer in this global health pandemic, but it may take about a decade or more before we see these numbers go back to what they were before, if we ever see them go back at all. And that's in part due to this cultural and generational shift that's been happening in the workplace over time. There has been an underlying culture shift in the workplace for many years. You've probably seen it in how offices are laid out, right? So we went from everyone in offices or cubicles to now the latest concept is open environment, right? How many of you guys have heard of this open concept? Few offices, and it's supposed to promote collaboration and team unity. We went from suits and stockings to slacks and buttoned up, and now we're doing jeans and t-shirts. So the corporate world has been on this evolving downward cycle, if you will, towards being completely casual, while simultaneously hiring a generation that's all about flexibility. So in regards to that generational shift, right now we've got baby boomers and Generation X still holding on to a lot of those leadership positions in corporate America. But the millennials, like myself, we are slowly gaining ground, right? And for us, we're all about flexibility, technology, and ensuring that our work life complements our personal life and not the other way around, the way that previous generations have viewed that relationship. So this paired with COVID-19 is kind of why we're here chatting about how to ace the virtual interview. Okay, so before COVID, this 86% number hovered around 75%. And that's because as technology has improved, companies realized how much money they could be saving by decreasing travel budgets tied to interviewing and integrating tech, right? They no longer had to spend hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars flying candidates, not just around the country, but around the globe. And all of those airfare fees, along with hotel accommodations, the meals, the pomp and circumstance that comes with when you're relocating a client or having a candidate travel for interviewing. This 70% number, virtual interviews are good for the environment. Why is that relevant to what we're talking about today? Whether you believe in global warming or not, community outreach and responsibility has become a huge employer marketing topic that companies have been forced to reckon with. And that's because of that generational and cultural shift I was talking about. Candidates today want to know how their employer is making an impact on their community specifically and the global community at large. So this really is low-hanging fruit for employers, especially those large global employers, and especially those smaller employers who want to compete for that top talent alongside those global employers, to be able to say, we are taking this seriously, and in one way that we can make a positive impact on our globe and our climate is by conducting virtual interviews. Now, this last number, it breaks my heart, but I'm hoping that by the end of the conversation today, this number, 62% of at least you on this session today, will no longer fit into this category. So this number is so important because it shows that nearly 2/3 of people on the market right now, in the market that we're in, which is a recession, do not like the main way to get a job right now. It also speaks to how HR professionals like myself have maybe not done as good of a job as we thought we were doing, preparing employees and candidates on how to stay relevant as the corporate world has shifted, how we hire and interact with both candidates and employees. So I'm here today to make sure that those of you who are watching and those of you who will watch this in the future who fall into this 62% now get more comfortable with virtual interviews, because unfortunately they are here to stay, but fortunately I've got some tricks up my sleeve to help you better navigate this part of your job hunting process. Okay. All right. So we're going to hang out and talk about 5 tips. These are the 5 tips that we're going to focus on today. We're going to talk about foolproofing the technology. We're going to then talk about setting the scene, which is what you see behind me. Insider scoop, this literally just went up last night. My sister is in Chicago. We were on a Zoom just about all night, moving pictures and all of this stuff. It's super important to set your scene. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about what you're wearing, dressed to impress, because that is a little different from doing it in person. We're going to talk about planning for the unexpected. I pleaded and begged, and Tiffany and Hibba were so accommodating. Can we please do this during my 2-year-old's nap time? So you do not have a wild, crazy tot busting in on the session. And they were like, yes, working mom, yes. And I was like, thank you. So we're going to talk about when you plan for that, how you plan for that, and what the heck happens when things go unexpectedly awry. And then we're going to talk about standing out from the crowd. So today, what we're doing is each of these tips tackles a conscious or subconscious bias that your interviewer may have. So we're going to set you up to easily or more easily overcome those. Okay. So often candidates, when they're interviewing, they think they just get through the interview, right? To make it to an offer. But often there are bigger hurdles in their way. So in this case, we've got to make it through a tech hurdle. We've got to make it through interview biases and added stresses and pressures that they're feeling in their professional and personal life, tightened or cut down budgets, and just an increasingly competitive market. So we're going to tackle all those roadblocks on your way to an offer. So what we're going to do is ensure that technology is an assembling block. And then we'll move into using your home as a way to stack the cards in your favor by strategically combating those biases. Some of those biases you might have heard of before, like the first impression bias. So if you've never heard of what the first impression bias is, this is what happens when an interviewer first engages you. They're going to size you up and make a split-second decision on your candidacy. Regardless of whether you said, hello, my name is, regardless of whether they've introduced you, it's in that first split second, something happened, something you did, something you wore, something in your setup allowed them to size up your candidacy in that moment. Some other biases that we're going to strategically work on today is called the halo and the horn effect. And what that is, it's when an interviewer will correlate something on your resume, in your background, or how you present yourself, and immediately associate it either positively or negatively and make a decision about your candidacy. So there are several other biases we could get into, but those are the main ones we're going to talk about today. So I realize that a lot of these are what I like to call no-duh tips. And Hib and I were talking about this. What might seem obvious to me as an HR and recruiting pro might not be obvious to the rest of the world. So we're going to handle some no-duh tips for a couple of reasons. One, it's always good to be reminded of the no-duhs because sometimes we forget. And secondly, it may paint them in a new light that you haven't considered before. You know, for in-person interviews, the candidate is very limited on what they can control, right? You're almost forced to play by the employer's rules. With virtual interviews, some of that power is transferred back to the candidate. And so that's why these tips are so important. So let's jump in. The 24-hour rule. And Hibba, you are down here. So hop in if I've missed a question because I'm in the zone. You just hop in and ask those questions as we go along.
I got you.
Awesome. So the 24-hour rule, some of you have probably heard this before. Please, please, please do yourself a favor and download the technology at least 24 hours before your scheduled interview. Preferably 48 to 72 hours before, because we're going to need some time to test it and get a resolution if we need one. So you should also go on and download that technology. For example, we're using Zoom. I use these same tips for myself. So I've got Zoom on my iPhone, that's right here. I've got Zoom on my tablet. So if something crazy happens with my computer, I can immediately pop up on my cell phone, or I can immediately pop up on my tablet. You want a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, okay? Obviously, your computer should always be plan A. But tablets are good for backup. So the reason we want to put it in this order, computer, phone, tablet, is for another foolproof layer. That's because should your internet go down, you can typically pick up your cell phone and use that as a hotspot. So that way you can immediately get plugged in. All right. So if your computer goes down, your Wi-Fi at home goes down and it messes with your computer, let's just say you didn't charge your cell phone and that dies. If possible, order a hotspot from Amazon, from Best Buy, wherever your favorite tech shop is. And you're probably thinking, this lady is crazy. Why do we need all of these plans? Well, you'd be surprised. I have worked with tens of thousands of candidates. And last October, we had a tornado come through Dallas. And I had told my candidate who was interviewing for a high profile job, do these things. You know my 24, 48, 72-hour rule. You know my plan A, B, and C. You fail to plan, you plan to fail. Sure enough, the tornado came through as he was interviewing and he had to turn on that hotspot. So make sure you follow the 24, 48, 72-hour rule and get a hotspot. You also want to test your Wi-Fi connection. So speedtest.net is your friend. Okay, you want to use that to test if the Wi-Fi service you're currently subscribed to is fast enough to handle all of the technology that you're going to be using during your video conference so that all of that can go smoothly. Okay, once you've got all your tech set up, or if you need help, get a tech buddy. You've got to have tech on standby. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, that's my husband. He's a techie by trade, so he was frantically getting all of this set up hours ago. So I am personally tech's worst nightmare. They hate to see me coming. When we were in an office setting, they would try to close their doors. I would say something is broken. It was merely dead. So you want to make sure that you get all of your tech checked out and to have tech on standby for a couple of reasons. Broken tech is a huge turn off during interviews. Whether it's your fault or not your fault, it's a huge turnoff and could negatively impact your candidacy. It's a point of frustration for a couple of reasons. One, interviewers are already reminiscing about when they didn't have to deal with this, right? Interviewers are set up to be catered to. The party is at their location. They don't have to go anywhere. Typically, the candidate is going to come to the office. So all they have to do is grab a coffee and mosey into the conference room. And two, they've now carved out time on their calendar to connect with you, and now that can't happen. So oftentimes, broken tech leads to failed offers. If they already have a solid candidate in the pipeline that was able to successfully complete their interview, they might just go on and move forward with that candidate to save time, okay? So set up time with your techie, do a dry run a day or two before the interview, use your cell phone and your tablet. That gives you a chance to download any updates that might need to happen before the interview and all of that. So moving on, clean your camera. I had to clean my camera before we started today. It's a simple tip, but it makes a world of difference. Smudges are distractions. And when you're doing a virtual interview, you want to limit the number of distractions and have all of the attention focused on you as the main attraction. So another reason you want to make sure you give your camera a good wipe down is because we're dealing with lighting and shadows. I didn't put all of my lighting on today because I wanted to play with my face and my scenery to give you guys an example of what I'm talking about. So you also want to be sure that you check your mic to make sure that you're coming in loud and clear. So often my clients will ask me, so what time should I join my meeting the day of? I have a rule for everything, and they usually include numbers. This is my 30, 15, 5-minute rule, okay? So 30 minutes prior to start time, you should be doing your final walkthrough in case of any changes have occurred. So you want to use this time to start silencing your kiddos, your life partners, and any other technology in your home, including your cell phone. So Alexa, Google Home, any technology that could chime, ding, talk back to you when you don't need it talking to you in an interview, go on and shut those down, okay? Think home alerts. Again, I'm married to a techie. If a door or window opens, the whole house is going to hear about it. It's annoying most days, but should we have an intruder, I'll be grateful for it. And I don't need that going off during my interview. So think of those things, okay? At 15-minute mark, this is actually the best time to get dressed. I broke that rule today because Hiba, Tiffany, and I were hanging out before and just getting to know each other a little bit more, but typically 15 minutes before is the best time to get dressed. Ladies, and anyone else who's wearing makeup, you want to do that about an hour before to let that settle. Think camera equals glare, right? So let that makeup settle in on your face and then go in. I even have my powder brush and touch those T-spots so you're not glistening right here in the middle of your face, okay? And then getting down to the 5-minute mark. At 5 minutes, you should be logged in and waiting for your interview to start. You don't necessarily have to have your video up and your mic off mute, but the golden rule is you do not want your interviewer waiting for you. We don't have anything to blame it on. We don't have traffic or anything like that. That's typically our scapegoat. So you want to be waiting for them, not the other way around. Also, this is also a good time for you to set up your cell phone. A good way to improve your virtual interviewing skills is to record yourself. Take it all in, go on and put the cell phone right there, record it, and then after your interview, go back and watch it again. So that way you can see where you stumbled and areas where you could improve. You can also see if your scene behind you is working to your advantage or to your disadvantage. Okay. Hiba, any questions so far?
Yes, we do. So we have one on the technology question.
Okay.
What advice do you have for somebody that probably doesn't have, can't afford the other three tech options? Like, do you have advice for them if they don't have that?
And when they say they don't have the other three options, does that mean they don't have a cell phone or a tablet?
Um, yes. So if they don't have a cell phone, tablet, hotspot, like what other advice do you have for them?
Sure, great question. So if you don't have a cell phone or a tablet, I recommend downloading other video conference options. So for example, earlier today, I was on Skype. So you can always download and make a free account on Skype. You, of course, can use Zoom. There's several other free video conference technologies that you can use. And at the beginning of your interview, I would go on and let the interviewer know and say, hey, if for whatever reason we get disconnected on Zoom, I've gone on and proactively made us a meeting ID and password on Skype or another video conference platform. So that way, if something wonky goes on here, we can just move on to that other platform and it's easy peasy.
Okay. And then what do you think about those virtual backgrounds that, Zoom or other like other services have when you're setting your scene? Do you prefer having just like your regular scene or those like virtual backgrounds that can kind of get noisy sometimes, but what is your thoughts?
Okay. This is just my opinion. Do not use those. Sometimes you look like a floating bobblehead. For whatever reason, this is new technology and we haven't quite mastered, so it doesn't look like you're like a what is that? When they outline the chalk of the body, that's kind of what it reminds me of. So I would rather you just be up against a blank wall. If you don't have the resources or the tools or the desire to set all of this up, and we're going to get into that a little later, actually on this slide, just use a blank wall. Now, if you're somewhere you have no business being, like on the beach when you should be in the house or whatever like that, that's a good backup plan. But if you can, just take it up against a blank wall.
Okay, yeah, I 100% agree. If you're somewhere where you're not supposed to be, you might want
You might
to.
want to use a backdrop, but if
Yes,
you can
yes.
get up against the wall,
And
yes.
then we have another question, kind of
Okay.
more of a statement. It's, I know you're probably going to get more into the dress to impress, but how do you project like energy and style virtually? She says, so that my silver/gray hair doesn't peg me as old. I have literally had a recruiter suggest that I should dye my hair, which that is a no.
That
So
is a no.
no.
Relish in your beauty, honey. There is only one of you, and that is your X factor. And from a legal HR standpoint, that is illegal and that is discrimination. So we are living through a global pandemic, and we're going to talk about this a little later. Do the best grooming you can with what you've got and move on. If you rock it, honey, bring your confidence, bring your personality, because no one else can compete with that. Other candidates might be able to compete with skill set, similar resume, background, whatever. There is only you. So you let those grays shine, honey. I've got some. Full disclosure, I was in my bathroom about an hour ago using a permanent marker trying to get rid of them. And I was like, you know what? I don't have the time. They're going to get these grays today, and that's okay.
Yes. We have one more, and then we'll
Okay.
let you get to the next slide. That's hi from New Jersey. Are there any privacy issues with recording the interview? Should you tell the interviewer? I thought you legally had to tell someone when they are being recorded, but it's a lot of gray lines with, everything going on right now. So what do you think?
Yes, that is correct. You, depending on your state, and in some states, depending on your city and possibly even county jurisdiction, it may or may not be illegal to record the interviewer without their knowledge. But there's a quick workaround for that. Just let them know you'd like to record the interview and go on and put it on yourself. You could say something like, hey, thanks for interviewing me today. If you're okay with it, I would really like to record this session because I'm doing a lot of virtual interviews, and going back to look at the replay, if you will, is only helping me to improve. So if you're okay with it, I would like to record this interview. I won't share it with anyone. It'll be for my personal use only. Perfect. All right, so let's get into setting the scene. So we've covered technology. Next, we're going to get into covering or setting your scene. So a critical piece of advice is this: if it's in the frame, it's fair game. Okay. So what that means is if your interviewer can see it, they may or may not use it to your advantage. So let's do everything in our power to create a backdrop that tips the scale in your favor. First, you want to conduct your meeting in a clutter-free space. Clutter is distracting for you and definitely for your interviewer. You also want to stay away from intimate parts of your home, like your bedroom or your closet, because these spaces can give insights into your personal life that can play negatively on the conscious or subconscious of your interviewer. So everything we're doing is to project and cast it a winning image, a hireable image, right? So you want to avoid any type of interviewer influence. If you want to, take the interview up against a neutral wall, just like we were talking about. But that neutral wall isn't the only thing that we've got to work with. So let's get into these. We're decluttering the area. We're going to create a winning ambiance. We're going to bring in props strategically, and we're also going to be aware of our surroundings. So let's start with the ground, your flooring in your interview space, and we're going to work our way up. Okay. So hardwood floor or tile floors are the best for conducting interviews. So have you ever noticed how it's just more crisp and clear when you're speaking in your bathroom, right? That's partly because there's typically no carpet in that bathroom. If you ever wondered why you sound like Mariah Carey in the bathroom and then you walk out and you sound like, I don't know, like a failed American Idol contestant, that has to do with the flooring partly, right? So keep this in mind when you're selecting your space for an interview. If you're someone that has a soft voice, you're definitely going to want to take the room or take the interview in a room that doesn't have carpet because you already struggle with projecting your voice. If you have a heavy accent or you've received feedback where the person on the other end of the phone or on the other end of the camera is having a difficult time understanding you, this is a tip to where go take your interview on a hardwood floor, and that acoustics is going to help you come across much clearer. So it's often unavoidable. Carpet is in most homes, but if you can, let's go that route. So just remember, carpet is cozy, but hardwood is better for virtual interviews, at least. Okay. So a caveat to that is I have a nervous twitch. Okay. I click my pen, which is why it's nowhere near my hand. that same acoustics that's working for us to make sure our voice is heard loud and clear, it's going to pick up every foot tap. It's going to pick up every pin click. So just be careful of that when you're figuring out where in your home you want to take your interview. Okay. So now let's dive into strategically placing those props, right? Okay. So we're going to work on enhancing our backdrop. Again, if you want to get a little spicy and not take it up against a virtual interview or a blank wall. So things that you want to ensure are not in the frame. Let's start there. Okay. These items you don't want to pull in if they give any insight into your religious or political beliefs, unless, of course, you're interviewing for a role where that's necessary. But besides that, stay away from that. You want to stay away from highlighting your views on any topic or topics that are traditionally off limits in a traditional interview setting. Okay. You want to stay away from highlighting your views on anything that could potentially get your interviewer in trouble. So anything that's going to could be posed as discriminatory. So for example, I have a picture of my little one right here. I'm using this as a prop because typically I wouldn't. We're going to get into, do I have pics of the kids? Do I have pics of my family? We're going to get into all of that. Okay. You also want to remember to move any of those chores type of items. So that basket of laundry, I see you. Yes, you right there with that basket of laundry. Slide that to the side, honey. We don't want to see that. We don't need to see that. We've all got it, but it's just sitting over here. We want to make it look like we've got it going on and we've got it together. Okay. Okay. And that bra. Yep. That bra that's hanging on that doorknob, that nightgown, that robe. Go on and move all of that out of the way. I know some of you are probably turning around like, what? Is she talking about me? Yeah, girl, probably you. Move that bra out of the screen. Okay, so don't panic. If you do, just laugh it off, move it away. But these are things you want to be mindful of as you determine where you're going to place that camera. Some things you also want to think about are stacks of mail you've been meaning to open. Move that out of the frame. Most likely, you don't know the other person or the person on the other side of the camera. So everything that's in your staging, you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up to optimize or maximize safety, right? You also want to move valuables out of the frame. Obviously, the obvious reason is to protect yourself from theft, but a less obvious reason that comes to mind is overcoming a potential conflict when it comes to your compensation. So if you have valuables in the frame, your interviewer's imagination can start to run wild. So let's play a game, shall we? Hiba, come off mute and play this game with me.
Okay, I'm ready.
So if I had a Louis Vuitton bag right here, what would you immediately think of me?
That you do like the finer things and, you got a good coin.
There we go. Presto. Whenever we see a lady walking down with a fabulous Gucci, Louis, Dior, whatever, just like Hiba said, we're thinking this woman probably is financially secure. While that's not always the case, that's naturally what most of us would think, right? So if valuables are in the background, interviewees could consciously or subconsciously equate that since you're already making enough money to purchase this valuable item, you might not need as much money in your salary because you're already comfortable, right? So you're probably thinking, why would they think that? But I'm telling you, it happens all the time behind closed doors in those interview debrief sessions. So for example, this has been years ago, but I had a junior candidate who was interviewing for an entry-level position, and he was super professional, super buttoned up, but apparently, and I wasn't on the interview, but he had some gorgeous, what appeared to be antique lamps in the background. And after the interview, my hiring manager and I, we were debriefing and talking about all the candidates and, who we wanted to move forward with. And she said, I don't want to move forward with him because he seems like he might have a silver spoon in his mouth. And I said, what are you talking about? And she got into, I saw these lamps in the background and they look super expensive, and he must come from wealth. And, silver spoon babies, they don't work as hard. I had to say, pause. Okay, hold on. Let's take a time out. What does that have to do with the pay salary band we've allotted for this role, right? What does that have to do with this candidate's answers in our interview questions? What does this have to do with the resume that he has presented to us? He could have been hanging out at his grandmother's house. The lamps could have been made of plastic for all we know. We can't verify any of this, but that had made such an impression in her mind that she was using that, unfortunately, in his case, against him to size him up, to size up his candidacy. So that's why we have to be very careful as to what is in frame when we conduct these virtual interviews, okay? So you also want to be careful about books, movies, or pictures that are in your frame. So I know I've probably scared you all to death saying, you know what, Crystal, forget it, I'm out, I'm just doing it up against a white wall. Don't worry, there's still plenty of stuff we can use to our advantage. So let's get into what you can use and how you can strategically use these props to your advantage. So first off, before you start going around picking up props from around your house, let's do a little research on our interviewers beforehand so we can pull in the right conversation starter pieces, okay? Some of my favorite props are books, movies, and photos, which I just warned you about. And that's because you can strategically place them to play on the psyche of your interviewer. So for example, I went to LSU, go Tigers. If I am interviewing someone and I see a strategically propped LSU pillow or a throw or an LSU bobblehead, I'm going to say, oh my God, you went to LSU? I went to LSU, right? College days are where most of us made some of our most fun memories. And so instead of being a stalker, which we all are when we're looking for a job and saying, I saw on LinkedIn that you went to LSU, I went to LSU. Let that prop work to your advantage and work it into the conversation naturally. Even if the topic doesn't come up, your interviewer most likely saw it and it's going to play positively on their psyche. Okay, this is called the halo effect. And so we're working on positioning ourselves in a more positive light by highlighting a positive commonality that we have with the decision maker. Okay, so for example, here in Texas, there is a huge rivalry between the University of Texas Longhorns and the Texas A&M Aggies. I have literally had to pull hiring managers aside and say, I know you're an Aggie, but you will hire this Longhorn if they are the right candidate for the job. And I have to go toe to toe with them all the time. And I get their little shady looks. And I don't care because that's a form of discrimination that we have to fight against. And so strategically using props like this in your favor can help. You can pull in things like instruments, board games, to place it directly in the background, further in the background. These days, it's so easy to find your interviewers on Instagram, Facebook, see what they're up to, see what their hobbies are, and then strategically work those items in if they make sense to you and based on your style and your personality, work them into your frame so you can either reference them or they can play positively on the psyche of your interviewer. Hiba, just checking in. Any questions so far?
We do. So we have two.
Okay.
Are using headphones okay? Also, does it have to be behind a wall? Do you recommend like placing your camera somewhere else? Those were the two that popped up.
Yes. So the first question was, what about headphones? You can totally use headphones. Absolutely. I don't have a problem with them at all as an interviewer or as an interviewee. There's no reason to make technology more complicated. You've got to get into rerouting and testing. Can you hear me? Can you not hear me? Yes, headphones are fine. And no, you do not have, your only background does not have to be up against a wall like this. If you're in a nice library setting, if you have that in your home, you can definitely use that. If you want your kitchen to be your backdrop, you can do that to really drive home that you're working from home and you've made it work for you. Please do your dishes. No one wants to see an untidy kitchen. But yes, it doesn't have to be up against a wall. No. Good? Perfect. Okay, so let's dive into that bookshelf, right? So this is a prop and a tool that a lot of interviewers are using these days. A strategically placed book can do wonders. So one, of course, it can be referenced during the icebreaker. Two, they see you're an avid reader, which equates to intelligence. And three, it helps when you can't find any commonality between yourself and your interviewer. You can always find common ground on your career. So for example, if I was interviewing Tiffany for an HR job and we were both HR professionals, but Tiffany is into things that I'm not into. We didn't go to the same schools. We never lived in the same place. We can find correlation in our professional background. So I might strategically place books right here that are about HR or about recruiting or about growing people's careers and talents. When you do that, you want to make sure that that spine of the book, that the title pops out and is very clear, that it can be picked up on screen. So it can immediately be an eye catcher. So often people want to lay their books down where the pages are facing out towards the camera, and that's not doing us any favors. You want to flip that over and make sure the spine of that book is visible for a couple of reasons. Like I said, one, you can reference it, but the second thing is, even if your interviewer doesn't make mention of the books in your background, they can immediately see that you're serious about your career, you're passionate about it, because you've got literature and books and training documents in your personal library, okay? So let's dig into lighting and camera positioning. So depending on if you're conducting your interview in a room with a lot of natural lighting or very little, will determine your room setup. It's also what's also going to determine the lighting in your room is the time of day of your interview. So I always like to tell my candidates, if you can interview between 9 and 3, that is perfect. Typically the sun is shining. We can kind of gauge where it's going to be. The closer we get into fall and winter, time changes start working against us and different things like that. And the sunlight becomes a little less predictable. So if you can, schedule your interview from about 9 to 3, unless of course you're in Alaska where it's dark half of the year. Blessings unto you. We'll have to have a connect after this to figure out what we're going to do when it's pitch black outside. Okay. Lighting. If you don't have a lot of natural lighting to work with, you can bring in those selfie rings. I'm a millennial, barely, but get a selfie ring. I hear these are all the rave, but they can help make sure that you don't have shadows on one side of your face. Shadows in virtual interviews can be a distraction for your interviewers. So go on and play with that selfie ring. If you don't have a selfie ring, your handy dandy camera, there's a flashlight on the back of that. Go on and turn that on and position it to where it's going to highlight and brighten your face. You want to be as clear as possible on camera so your interviewer can see your bright, pretty face, okay? Next, and this takes a lot of practice. Hib and I have connected a couple of times, and I had to ask her, girl, am I looking at you or am I looking down here where you are, right? So I know it's hard, it's super difficult. And I'm sure some of you are like, Crystal, you're not always looking at the camera. You're absolutely right, because my notes are down here. But when you're interviewing, try your best to look in the camera, because of course you want to be thinking about how you're being perceived by the interviewer on the other side of the camera. Looking straight into the camera, it makes the interviewer feel like you're looking directly at them, like you're looking at them in their eyes. And that's what you would be doing if this was an in-person interview anyways. So I know it's super awkward to stare right in that lens. It's super awkward for me right now, just talking into space and looking in this camera, but it looks like I'm looking at you and that you have my undivided attention, and that is what we're going for. Okay, so if you aren't a person that walks into a room and immediately owns it, right? If you have a softer voice, or if you get a little nervous in front of the camera or just interviewing in general, I recommend you take your interview standing up. Studies have found that when someone is standing up, their posture is better, their voice carries better, and they just feel more and appear more confident. If you can, take your interview standing up if you have an issue with that. If you're not in a position where you can take your interview standing up, I recommend placing your camera slightly above head level. So that way it's going to force you to raise your neck a little bit, force you to look up, which is going to help you project and enunciate a lot better. Now, if you're like me, loudmouth, Southern girl, I can talk to the wall and the wall will walk away, then you're good to have that camera head on, okay? Questions about that?
Not about that, but I think everyone really wants to know more about just like the grooming. How should I look? What should I put on?
Yes. Okay, let's talk about that. Dressing to impress. I feel like you guys created these slides along with me. You're asking so many amazing questions. Okay, so while this is a virtual interview, it is still an interview, at least from the waist up. I'm not going to stand up because I've got these cute little bright yellow shorts on, but from the waist up, I am business ready. So if you want to rock your favorite shorts, your yoga pants, your jogging shorts, whatever, just remember not to stand up. Some people and some of my candidates and clients are risk takers. They choose to just dress the waist up. I don't have enough tricks in the world to get you out of that situation if that's the case. So just at least put on pants, okay? It's a conversation that HR professionals are having because it is happening. So first tip, you still have to wear pants, okay? Next, have a blazer on hand if possible. I'm not wearing my blazer because it's Friday. Typically office settings are a little bit more casual, but I'm telling you, a blazer can change everything, even video conferences. So it can make a t-shirt all of a sudden become business swag. I'm not recommending a t-shirt, but if you can, throw on a blazer. What's also nice about virtual, an easy way to look like you're more tailored is you can take pinch pins and pinch it in the back. So that's going to give you more of a tailored look without spending tailored dollars. Okay. So let's talk about colors. Men, I'm going to address the men first, and then ladies, I'm going to get to you. You want to wear an undershirt or two or a thicker shirt under your dress shirt, because typically those are so thin, the camera and some of the extra lighting you might bring is going to pierce straight through that shirt, and they're going to see all of your manly glory underneath. So make sure you layer up, especially with those thinner business shirts. Ladies, let's jump to you. The same applies to us. If you can, stay away from the whites, the creams, the pastel colors, because again, just like the men, that camera and that lighting, you're going to pierce straight through. Okay. We also have to be careful of our neckline. You'll see that I'm wearing a pretty high neckline. That's because V-cut, while it might be appropriate in person, for some reason, the camera makes it look like we're wearing club wear. So when you're wearing Hiba, you look good, girl. You're good. You're good. I see you checking. You're good. For some reason, depending on the camera angle, even if you're head on, that V-neck picks up a more dramatic drop when we're looking at the camera. So just be careful of that. Go in and raise it up, or wear an undershirt so that you're covered appropriately.
Few questions for you, Crystal.
Awesome.
For my glasses wear, I wear glasses. I feel the pain. Okay. Any tips for those who wear glasses because the reflection of the laptop does show? Any tips you have for that? And then one question came in about hair. I have locks. How should I wear my hair? I normally wear it in a bun. Any tips for those?
Yes. Okay. So let's address the glasses. I put my contacts in probably the first time this year because Corona. So I've been rocking my glasses. If you're more comfortable in glasses, wear your glasses despite the glare. Now that essentially corporate has gone home for the most part, people are accustomed to seeing a reflection in glasses. So you're totally fine. This is already a high pressure situation. So if you're more comfortable in your glasses, I definitely recommend you stick to those. In regards to having a lot of hair, honey, do you. If you want to wear a bun, wear a bun. If you want to style all that gorgeous hair to the side, it's totally up to you. I like to say business glam, there's never a problem with it. So that's a total personal choice.
Okay. And then one more question. Should the camera go from the waist up, shoulder up, full face? What do you recommend?
So I recommend typically from your bust up for a couple of reasons. One, this is totally for me. I had a baby, so I'm a little thick, right? So if you're bust up, you don't know that. You don't know if I have a 6-pack or a 12-pack. It's also less you have to worry about from an ironing standpoint. Those wrinkles, that lint, all of that stuff. If you went to the bathroom right before, typically you're going to get wet below the bust line. So that's why I always recommend bust and above. The reason I don't recommend anything higher than that, you sort of look like a floating bobblehead, and it can be a little distracting.
Okay, good tips, good tips. Okay, one more. Is it appropriate to wear brighter colors? Y'all see I'm wearing this, but I'm not having an interview right now. Bright pink blazers, like, is that okay? Or is it more like monotone, black, white, gray? What do you recommend?
Sure. So I recommend you do your research on the company culture. That's going to determine if you need to go into those more traditional colors like the blacks, the blues, the greens, the grays. If you're interviewing for a more forward-thinking company, a more hip company, a company that even if it's been around, it has more of that millennial approach to work, then a hot pink blazer is totally appropriate.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes. I can't believe this goes by so
Oh my
fast.
gosh, I can't
Um,
believe it.
I know. I want you to get into like the main thing that I feel like moms really struggle with is like, what do I do if my kid busts into this interview?
Yes. Okay, let's jump in. I can't believe an hour's almost flown by. So, yes, what if my kid bursts in? Apologize and move on. It's okay. Today, I've got my kid taking a nap and I've also got backup childcare. Sometimes both of those fail and a girl just wants her mama. It is okay. Corporate America and your interviewer should realize that now our two worlds have definitely collided and we're operating in kind of this crazy space. Just apologize for it, usher your little one out, and move on. It's even okay if you tell your interviewer, look, that threw me off my game a little bit. Give me a second to get back in my zone and then I'm ready to go. What happens if I get disconnected? We've already started talking about this, your plan A, your plan B, your plan C. But something that I want to hit home is if for whatever reason you're not able to reconnect with your interviewer, go on and send an email explaining the situation and explaining how you tried to rectify the situation to the person that confirmed the interview for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want you to call because sometimes the interviewer might just pick up the phone and call you, and then you're on another line trying to explain how you got disconnected and you missed the reconnect opportunity. Second, you now have a paper trail as to how there was a situation and you tried to rectify it. Next, where do I put my resume? Do I have it up on the screen? Do I have it printed out? I recommend printing it out so you're not doing like this, looking back and forth, right? Go on and tell your interview, hey, I've printed out my resume. I'm going to be taking notes on it. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing, okay? What ifs happen? Don't panic about them. What ifs could happen on the interviewer side? Don't let it distract you. Don't let it throw you off. What are some questions that these moms have specifically that I haven't catered to?
I think a lot of moms really, and not just moms, I think everybody just wants to know like things do happen.
Mhm.
And we just kind of got to roll with it. It's just the
Yes.
kind of situation we're in now. Sometimes I will have family members that run in, or, whatever the case may be.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes. And I want you to know that the HR team behind that interviewer, the recruiting team behind that interviewer is prepping these interviewers and these hiring managers and these decision makers to remind them of that. You also have to keep in mind, sometimes as a candidate, we get so bogged down on being perfect. I know we had that question before, what about my silver hair and do I put my hair in a bun and this and that and the lighting and the staging and all of this. That last bullet point that I wanted to drive home, you are the X factor. They are there to talk to you. They are interested in what you have to say. So don't let those distractions throw you off. Life happens. And I'm just going to be blunt. If that is the reason they discredit your candidacy, that's not where you belong, anyways. You want a culture that is going to accept the whole you, whether you're in the office or at home. Some things that I want to run through in just 30 seconds at the end of your interview, and this is good for virtual interviews or in-person interviews. You want to ask the interviewer if there are any red flags that you can address while you have them, while you have their time. So if there are any red flags or if they had further questions that they need clarity on to help them easily make a decision about your candidacy, you always want to save time for that. Next, this is where you can sell yourself. Lock down a timeline. Hold your interviewer's feet to the fire. It's totally appropriate to say, thank you so much. We're having this interview today on Friday. When should I expect to hear back from you? If they say, give us a week, next Friday, if you haven't heard back, you are completely in the clear to pick up the phone and call them for an update. Right now, with budget cuts and furloughs and this and that, sometimes hiring decisions get lost in the shuffle. You're fully in your right to follow up with them. Third, send a thank you note. Because we don't know if hiring managers are in the office or at home, do not send them anything to their personal home address. I've had that happen. Obviously, the person did not get the job because that is stalkerish. Go on and send a thank you email. If you want to jazz it up, you can always use something like paperless post. Let's get to questions.
Okay, I mean, you have literally dropped so many questions, like so many gems.
Love
I'm
it.
gonna stop the sharing just because
Okay.
everyone does want to see your background. That kind of came up in the chat. Okay, if you could sum up one way to stand out in a virtual interview, what would it be?
One way to stand out in a virtual interview. Oh, that's a hard one. One way, just one way.
It doesn't have to be one. I think maybe just one thing that you want people to walk out of today and just be like, okay, this is how I'm gonna stand out.
You have to enunciate and project. You have to. In an in-person interview, we take that for granted because we're sharing the same space, but we've got a microphone, we've got technology glitches, we've got internet possible issues. So to make sure you overcome all of that, make sure that you are really enunciating and projecting your voice, because even if they lose the vision of you, they can still hear your answers to the questions they have.
Perfect. Okay. Another question that came in is there any difference between like a phone interview and virtual where it's like a camera and Zoom? Do you have any tips for just like when it is just your voice, how you could kind of stand out? Well, you just did say enunciate, so that could be one of them.
Yes, and definitely with a phone interview, take those standing up. Also, take those in your bathroom because one, they can't see you, and two, that just seems to be where we have the best acoustics. And you can also look at yourself in the mirror. When you're looking at yourself in the mirror, that tends to boost our confidence and we get more animated. So I definitely recommend taking your phone interviews in the bathroom, standing up, looking at yourself in the mirror.
Okay, perfect. And then do you have sessions solely based on talking points, delivery, confidence? I know we couldn't get into everything today. We were very stuck on like just the environment, but do you have any sessions for that that people could connect with you on?
Absolutely. I have tons of upcoming sessions, and those are going to be published on my personal website, thecrystalo.com. So we'll be doing follow-up sessions like this there, and you can always join me there. You can also follow me on Instagram, where I'm constantly doing lives and different things like that, sharing as many tips as possible to my followers.
Okay, and then one more. How do you appropriately take notes during an interview, or use the notes without it being negative?
Sure. So, just like mentioned earlier, it is totally okay to look down like I'm doing now, take your notes, and look back in the camera. Go on and let your interviewer know that you're obviously very engaged and very interested, but you want to take some notes just to make sure you're following the conversation. So occasionally you might look down. That is no biggie at all. I don't recommend you typing your notes because then that gets distracting with all the clacking.
Yes, for sure. And then one last thing before I let us go.
Yeah.
How should people address the interviewer or the person that they're being interviewed by? Like, should they say that? Should they call them by their first name, last name? How should they address them?
Yes, you want to address them by their first name. This is a professional setting. So, unless, of course, you're interviewing a doctor or something like that, if Hiba and I were having an interview, I would address her as Hiba. I would totally expect her to address me as Crystal. Same as you would for an in-person interview.
Okay, perfect. You guys, I mean, we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours because
Yes,
it's
this was so
so
fun.
so much fun, so critical. I know the chat has a lot of questions. Anything that we didn't get to today, we will send to Crystal and she'll be able to follow up with you guys.
Yeah.
Crystal, just one more time, where can everybody reach you? Your socials, your website. I know it was on the slide, but we took it down, but just say it for
Yeah.
everybody.
Yes. So you can keep in touch with me on Instagram at the Crystal O, TheCrystalOh. And you can check me out on my personal website, thecrystalo.com.
Thank you so much, Crystal.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you for joining us for this Unity Hour today. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. We saw all your great questions, and we know that this is just very needed during this crazy, crazy time. We will see you guys next week. Don't worry, this session is recorded. It will be live on our channel very soon. And have a great rest of your Friday. Bye, everyone.